David woke up at 6 a.m., just like every day for the past 6 months. The routine was familiar but not comforting. He made his coffee, black and strong. Then he sat at his desk, ready to face another day of job hunting. His laptop hummed to life, the screen illuminating his tired face. He took a deep breath and began his daily ritual. First, he checked his email. Nothing new, no responses to his applications, no interview requests, just silence. David sighed but didn't let it discourage him. He had learned to expect disappointment, but he had also learned to push through it. He opened his browser and began searching job boards. Each click felt like a small act of hope. Hours passed. David applied to dozens of positions. Some felt like a stretch. Others seemed perfect. But he knew from experience that perfection on paper didn't always translate to reality. His fingers ached from typing cover letters. His eyes strained from reading job descriptions. But he didn't stop. He couldn't afford to, not with bills piling up and his savings dwindling. As the day wore on, David felt the familiar weight of despair creeping in, but he fought it off. He reminded himself of his worth, of his skills, of his determination. He had been through tough times before. This was just another challenge to overcome. As the sun began to set, David closed his laptop. Another day done, another step forward, even if it didn't feel like it. He rubbed his eyes and stood up. Tomorrow, he would do it all again, because that's what it took. That's what he was made of. David walked into the kitchen, the smell of dinner filling the air. His wife Sarah was at the stove, stirring a pot of soup. She turned and smiled at him. It was a smile that said more than words ever could. It said, "I believe in you." It said, "We're in this together." David felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the steam from the soup. "Any luck today?" Sarah asked. David shook his head. But before he could speak, Sarah was there, wrapping her arms around him. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "Tomorrow could be the day." David held her tight, drawing strength from her embrace. He didn't need to explain his frustrations. She understood. She always did. They stood there for a moment, two people against the world. Their moment was interrupted by the patter of little feet. Their daughter Emily ran into the kitchen. "Daddy!" she squealed, throwing herself at David's legs. He scooped her up, her giggles filling the room. "Did you find a job today, Daddy?" she asked, her eyes wide with innocence. David's heart clenched, but he smiled. "Not today, sweetie, but I'm not giving up." Emily nodded solemnly. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. "I made this for you," she said, handing it to David. He unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing of him, stick figure arms raised in triumph with the words, "Best Daddy Ever," scrawled across the top. David felt tears prick his eyes. He looked at his family, at the love surrounding him, and he knew no matter what happened, he was rich beyond measure. The next morning, David sat at his desk, ready to begin another day of searching. He opened his email, expecting the usual silence. But there, at the top of his inbox, was a message that made his heart skip a beat. The subject line read, "Job Opportunity, Marketing Manager Position." David's hands shook as he clicked to open it. The email was from a company he had applied to weeks ago. He had almost forgotten about it. But now, here it was, an invitation to interview. David read the email 3 times, making sure he wasn't dreaming. The position seemed perfect. It aligned with his skills, his experience, his passion. It was everything he had been hoping for. David called out to Sarah, his voice filled with excitement. She rushed in, worry etched on her face. But when she saw David smile, her expression changed. He showed her the email, watching as hope bloomed in her eyes. They hugged, laughing and crying at the same time. It wasn't a job offer yet, but it was a chance, a foot in the door, a reason to believe. For the rest of the day, David threw himself into research. He studied the company's website, their mission statement, their recent projects. He wanted to be prepared. He wanted to show them why he was the perfect fit. As he worked, he felt a spark of passion that had been missing for months. This wasn't just about finding a job anymore. It was about finding his purpose again, about proving to himself that he still had value to offer. David worked late into the night, fueled by hope and determination. Section 4. Preparation and Anticipation. The night before. The night before the interview, David couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned, his mind racing with possibilities. What if they liked him? What if they didn't? What questions would they ask? How should he answer? Sarah reached out in the darkness, her hand finding his. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her touch was enough to calm his racing thoughts. David got up early the next morning. He put on his best suit, the one he had worn to his college graduation. It felt a little tight now, but it still fit. He looked at himself in the mirror, straightening his tie. He saw the man he used to be, confident and full of potential, but he also saw the man he had become. Stronger, more resilient, ready for whatever came next. At breakfast, Emily presented him with another drawing. This one showed him sitting at a desk, surrounded by smiling stick figures. "This is you at your new job," she explained. David felt a lump in his throat. He hugged her tight, drawing strength from her innocent belief in him. Sarah packed him a lunch, just like she used to when he worked. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to David. As he prepared to leave, David took a moment to look around his home, at the walls that had witnessed his struggles, at the family that had supported him through it all. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the air of possibility. Then he stepped out the door, ready to face whatever the day might bring. The interview awaited, but more than that, his future awaited. And for the first time in months, David felt ready to meet it head-on. Section 5. The Interview and the Offer. David arrived at the company's office 30 minutes early. He sat in his car, reviewing his notes one last time. His hands were steady as he gathered his portfolio. His steps were sure as he walked into the building. At the reception desk, he announced his name with a confidence he had almost forgotten he possessed. The receptionist smiled and directed him to the waiting area. The interview room was bright and airy. 3 people sat across from David. They introduced themselves: the HR manager, the department head, and the CEO. David took a deep breath and began. As he spoke about his experience, his passion, his ideas, he felt something shift. This wasn't just an interview. It was a conversation. The panel leaned in, engaged. They asked questions that David was prepared for, thanks to his research. Time flew by. Before David knew it, 2 hours had passed. The CEO stood up, extending his hand. "Thank you, David," he said. "We'll be in touch soon." David left the office feeling light. He had done his best. He had shown them who he was. Now, all he could do was wait. The drive home was a blur. Sarah and Emily were waiting for him, their faces eager for news. David hugged them both. "It went well," he said. "Really well." 3 days later, the phone rang. David answered, his heart pounding. It was the HR manager. "David," she said, "we'd like to offer you the position." The words washed over him like a wave. He felt dizzy with relief, with joy, with 1,000 emotions he couldn't name. He accepted on the spot. When he hung up, he turned to his family. Their faces told him they already knew. They rushed to him, enveloping him in a group hug. Tears flowed freely, but this time, they were tears of happiness. Section 6. Reflections on Growth and New Beginnings. As David prepared for his first day at the new job, he found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. The months of struggle, of doubt, of fear. They had been hard, harder than anything he had faced before. But as he looked back, he realized something. Those months had changed him. They had made him stronger, more resilient, more grateful. He thought about the countless applications he had sent out, the rejections that had stung, the silence that had been even worse. But he also thought about the moments of kindness. The friend who had passed along his resume. The stranger who had offered words of encouragement at a job fair. The family that had never stopped believing in him. Each of these moments had been a thread, weaving together to form the fabric of his experience. David realized that this job wasn't just a paycheck. It was a new chapter, a chance to apply all that he had learned during his time of unemployment. He had learned patience, perseverance, the value of support, the importance of self-belief. These weren't skills listed on his resume, but they were perhaps the most valuable things he brought to his new role. As he put on his tie, ready to step into his new future, David made a promise to himself. He would never forget this journey. He would use it to fuel his passion, to drive his work ethic. And someday, when he was in a position to do so, he would reach out a hand to others struggling as he had, because he knew now more than ever the power of hope, the strength of determination, and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. With a deep breath and a smile, David walked out the door, ready to embrace whatever challenges and triumphs lay ahead.